All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning to everybody. March 29th, it's crazy. April is right around the corner. I can't believe it's Easter this weekend. It's just like this year is, it's really flying by. So thank you to everybody that's here with us today. We have presenters that are on spring break and they're still here to share information with you guys. So I'm very, very thankful for our Temecula team that's with us today. So
Maybe.
thank you. Lisa, Stephanie, Crystal are all going to be presenting to us a little bit later in our meeting on their recent FPM. So here's our agenda. We have our quick welcome this morning. We have Leticia from Sacramento. She's got our legislative update for us. We'll have a moment to network with one another. Melissa and Alicia will be sharing some accountability and assessment updates. Temecula is going to share out on their FPM, and then Colleen and I will close us out with some CSI, ATSI, that's a lot of acronyms, SFP and EL updates. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, sorry. I feel like everybody's old hat at this. I didn't see any new names on there, but just in case, we do have a Google Classroom. There is a link down here at the bottom of the screen. tinyurl.com/RCOE-NISO is a good way to find it if you've never accessed it before, but you'll find the Google Classroom up in the little waffle to the right. Click on Classroom, and then hopefully you see our class Network to Improve Student Outcomes right there, and you can access the information for today. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Leticia share her screen so that we can learn from her this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I hope you will or are enjoying your spring break. It's always a nice little time off to reset. So we'll keep our legislative update just brief. We're in spring break up here in Sacramento, so the legislature is off. It tends to be a quiet time, but it also tends to be a busy time because there's a lot of catching up for when they return next week. So the conversations right now have really been dominated by the budget discussion. As you may recall, the governor proposed his budget for 24-25 in early January. The budget subcommittees this is their busy time. They're really dissecting and vetting that proposal in very great detail, and also starting to develop their own assessment of how they want to start developing that budget moving into May revise and then budget adoption in June. So we're going to specifically focus on Proposition 98, the governor's proposal to hold harmless education, the K-12 or K-14 part of the state budget, Prop 98. And also the Legislative Analyst Office, which is a nonpartisan entity that provides recommendations, analysis of the budget proposal and recommendations to the state legislature in terms of what they'd like to consider as they're developing the state budget and countering some of the proposals that the governor has put forth. And then usually each house presents budget priorities. This year, only one house, the state Senate, presented, something. And it is a plan to take early action. So we'll go ahead and go into some detail about that. And then just putting some legislation on your radar. This is just the policy committees are starting to meet. They've had, I think, one hearing, so we're going to get into our busy part of the year with both budget and policy committees meeting throughout April. So just briefly, as you may recall, the extensions in the tax filings last year that went from April to October to November just really impacted the conversation and just the accuracy of the numbers, the state revenues. So the legislature and the administration largely developed a budget, passed a budget, enacted a budget For 23-24, that was all guesstimates. And once the revenues came in, they came in much lower than estimated in the budget that was enacted, especially for the 22-23 year. And much lower, that one was, that particular year was $26 billion less than was estimated in the budget. So for the budget, they usually look at the prior year, make some adjustments there, usually in the hundreds of millions, not billions. They address current year, just changes that need to be made, and then also the budget year, which is the following year. So in this particular year, it's the 22-23 that had the biggest deficit or lower revenues, which essentially affects the minimum guarantee for Proposition 98. So, and by a huge margin. So that's about, as you can see from here, about $9 billion. So the governor is proposing, he came up with a very creative solution. And so it's essentially providing the education part of the budget, Prop 98, with a loan, if you will, of $8 billion. This is going to be a cash loan, so it'll be from the state's cash, resources. And the governor is proposing to then start paying that back or down in future years, starting in 25-26 on an annual basis of about $1.6 billion. So this is something that that has caused a lot of discussion, has caused a lot of questions and some concerns, especially from, the California State Teachers Association has expressed concerns with this particular proposal because the impact, the ongoing impact to Proposition 98 levels is still unknown. So there are a lot of questions about this. The governor was very creative in coming up with something that essentially stabilizes education funding in the short term, but the long-term impacts are to be determined or yet are unknown. So, so we want to give him kudos for that, but we also want to fully understand what the net impact is for education funding. So the Legislative Analyst Office has expressed major concerns, essentially calling this an interest-free loan from the state's cash resources, and also making repayments on that starting 25-26, so in future years. It's a solution that is unprecedented. So proceed with caution for the legislature as they contemplate this proposal. It also highlights that the governor's proposal will further muddy the budget picture moving forward, what the true condition of the shortfall is, and also creates, structural deficits moving forward this year and moving forward, and likely impacting the rest of the budget, the non-Prop 98 budget, which that's how they come up with the $8 billion, right? It's making cuts to the rest of the budget. So we're talking about public safety, health and human services, higher education, and other state government funding. So it comes at it's a trade-off, and it does come at a cost. We have heard in budget committees a lot of advocates from the programs that would be affected if this solution is to be adopted. And we're hearing a lot of advocates who are lifting up the impacts to foster youth. So just, nothing is simple, but it's just something that they want to make sure that the legislature understands what the effects are outside of Prop 98. So the LAO is proposing alternatives for the legislature to consider. Some of those are fully drawing down the rainy day fund or the reserves. We have reserves for the state for the whole budget, and also a very special rainy day fund for education, or Proposition 98. So it's fully drawing down those reserves. Also exploring one-time solutions, so review unallocated funds to capture some of those savings, in particular calling out community schools grant. So that is a multi-billion-dollar investment that the state made. Not all of those funds have gone out to LEAs in order to lift up those programs. Explore one-time reductions to certain ongoing programs, the Extended Learning Opportunity Program, the CTE Incentive Grant Program. So just really lifting up major investments that the state has made in the past few years and find ways to capture some savings, even on a temporary basis. So ongoing spending, looking at that, rejecting the COLA, as the COLA is minimal, 0.76%. In other ongoing programs, the governor is proposing to increase funding for school meals and literacy screeners. So this is something that the LAO is recommending to reject these proposals because it's adding spending as opposed to reducing. Also planning for lower attendance and then capturing savings through LCFF. Exploring changes to ongoing programs, reevaluating the formulas established for the English Extended Learning Opportunity Program, state preschool, school nutrition, school transportation, and then the transitional kinder staffing. So it's the ratios, right? I think in the last the last budget, they went from 12-1, now 10-1. So trying to figure out if there's an opportunity to capture savings by delaying the lower ratios for TK and just capture savings in the short term. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the houses did propose a budget solution or budget plan, and they're largely focusing on capturing early savings, so taking early action. It's a plan that would essentially really implement many of the proposed solutions that the governor proposed in his January budget proposal. And it's drawing down from the rainy day fund and leaving some balance behind so that there's still something in the rainy day fund for future years. And it largely contains $17.1 billion in general fund solutions. So this is the whole budget. And it's through all of these mechanisms, program reductions, borrowing. And again, this is a whole budget, shifting some funds, delaying some funds, and then deferring revenues for some funds. This is just a visual representation of where that might come from in terms of dollar amount. So again, this is the entire budget. And then in particular for education is the K-12, K-14, Prop 98 is largely held harmless. So the biggest impact that we'll see in education is on the higher ed part of the budget. And then in particular for the K-14 side is mostly dealing with facilities. These are investments that have not been available to the K-14 side, the K-12 side in the past years because they have been delayed before as a way to solve for, just the budget. So it's another delay in accessing funds for facilities programs. So it's something that I think seems reasonable. So late last week, or March 20th, the governor and the two leaders of each house had a press conference or released a press announcement that they have come to an agreement to take early action on the budget. So have those immediate savings be adopted. And they will go ahead and take action when they come back from spring recess. So it's next week. And the solutions are anywhere between $12 to $18 billion to start chipping away at that budget deficit that has to be dealt with as the budget development process continues. So we are going to see something in the immediate future. So that's just the update on the budget front. And these are just a few bills that I wanted to make sure I brought up to your attention. This legislative year, over 2,124 bills were introduced, lots of ideas. And our office is tracking about 500 bills. So we're still going through the legislation because you know, things keep changing, and we just keep looking and analyzing whether or not we need to flag a bill for you. But we have identified a few bills for this particular group in relation to English learners. The English Learner Roadmap. There are two bills. These two bills have already been heard in Assembly Education Committee. They both passed out of that committee. They're now moving on to appropriations. AB 2071 relates to requiring the State Board of Education to develop and adopt the English Learner Roadmap Parent Toolkit. So, so this is something that would be beneficial for LEAs and parents, right? So again, support for this. It moved out of policy committee. The next bill that also relates to the EL roadmap. This is, you know, an effort to have a more of a statewide implementation program by requiring CDE to develop a plan, a statewide plan for the implementation of the EL roadmap policy. So again, lots of support in committee for these two proposals. So it's just really a step, an additional step in order to really bring to fruition the goals of the EL roadmap. So, so just moving ahead to three other bills that we just wanted to, you know, bring to your attention. SB 1129 would have required the state board to establish a work group and evaluate and provide recommendations and models for alternative local control accountability plans for different types of LEAs. And I say would have because this bill will not move forward this year. So we'll see if this conversation progresses for future years. But for this year, it's not going to move forward. And then Senate Bill 1315, this is a bill that would require the CDE, this California Department of Education, to provide a report to the superintendent, the governor, and the legislature on the number and types of reports that LEAs are required to annually submit. So this is, the goal here is to identify all the reports that are required and see if there is a way to pare those down to really evaluate if some reports are necessary, if maybe you can consolidate reports. And the goal is having fewer reports on an ongoing basis. So this bill is in the Senate Education Committee pending a hearing. And then lastly, AB 2268 relates to the LPAC and how it, as you know, TK is the first year of a 2-year kinder session. So, so right now, LPAC is applicable to TK, you know, students. So this bill would expressly exclude the LPAC from applying to TK students because it is not an appropriate assessment tool for 4-year-olds. So whether or not there is an alternative, we are going to hear if there is discussion around that. The bill is set for hearing for April 3rd. But also want to let you know that we have just recently taken a position to support this bill. Thank you to all of those who provided us with your expertise, and that this is definitely a good idea to expressly exclude TK students from being subjected to or subject to taking the LPAC assessment. So we'll see how that bill progresses. And that is it from Sacramento. So I'll stop sharing and I'll make myself available to questions, but I'll hang out in the meeting for a bit. So just hear other updates. So Thank you, Lisa.
Leticia, I have a quick question for
Sure.
you regarding that last bill.
Mhm.
You know, I'm highly interested in seeing how that one moves forward. But what's interesting in the language that you just showed is it says it's listening and speaking and reading and writing aren't mentioned. And I had noticed that previously, meant to send you an email, but got busy. Do you know why reading and writing aren't mentioned right there?
We do not know. I
Okay.
know that there is a lot of support for this bill. So we will inquire in terms of if their intention is to still provide an assessment in the other two domains that were not
Mhm.
listed. So we'll go ahead and clarify that. Yeah.
Because in all honesty, those are the most difficult domains for the TK students. The two that aren't listed, reading and writing, I would say those are very developmentally inappropriate for TKs. So just wanted to make a note of that.
So
Lisa,
they're subjected to all domains. Is
Oh.
that so? When you're assessing like kindergartners, they're assessed on everything.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask the
Melissa-
question. Hopefully I'll get something before the meeting's over.
Yeah. Melissa, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say that in the bill language, it says that existing law requires the English language development test to assess pupils in kindergarten in listening and speaking as provided. So I think it's
Mhm.
assuming that they're only assessed in listening and speaking as it is, and therefore are
Oh.
only going to be applying that to the listening and speaking. But again, this is just reading what it currently says. But that may not be consistent with what is currently being implemented. So we'll have to make sure that the implementation is consistent with what is actually in the law.
Maybe California is going above and beyond what's in the law right now, but wouldn't that be tragic if all that was removed was the listening and speaking because of that nuance of the language? Oh my goodness.
So just because I anticipate a clarifying question coming my way. So currently districts are assessing kindergartners because this is intended to exclude the TKers from having a mirror experience as kindergartners, right?
Mhm.
So kindergartens are assessed in all four domains. In practice, so from what I'll look at the bill again because I did notice what Melissa said maybe a few weeks ago when I first read it. So just to ask for clarification. But in practice, kindergartners are being assessed in all four domains. Okay.
Yeah, and it is not optional. It's a mandatory. Those are all four domains are mandatory administration for all, are part of the mandatory administration for all TK and kindergarten students.
Okay.
And those samples that I sent you, Leticia, were from the reading or were from the writing section, I believe, just to connect that for you.
Okay. And no, I saw that.
Okay.
I'm like, oh gosh, a four-year-old is expected to know this.
And
Yes.
sometimes they're three. If you do summer testing in your district, you might have 3-year-old little guys
Yeah.
being asked to do that. So
Okay.
there are quite a few comments in the chat. Matt has some feelings I'm feeling from the chat about what Leticia was talking about. Just looking at the last one, agreement to take early action, 12
Yeah.
to $18 billion shortfall. Elio says something between 50 to 70 billion in shortfalls. How does 12 to 18 cover that? I don't know if that's an easy response, Leticia, but do you want to
Yeah,
address
sure.
that?
So the larger figure is for like a 3-year cycle. So as I mentioned, you know, the 2022, the prior year budget, the current year, and then moving forward. So that's kind of like the larger number. The legislature is trying to chip away as much as possible to bring that what they have to deal with in, you know, making more difficult decisions, maybe with cuts, et cetera, that I think are inevitable. Bring that number down so they can really just focus on a more manageable number. So it is, we won't know until May whether if it's on the higher end of the, you know, nearly, I think they had 68 billion, the governor had 38 billion. So there is a wide difference, but this is a good way of the legislature just trying to get their handle on what they have to do, because I think cuts are unavoidable if we're dealing with a much larger number. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leticia. I'm going to move us into networking. And so this is a time that we really love to provide to you all, because we recognize that state and federal program directors are often on a little island in their districts, being the only ones that do what they do in the district, and our English learner friends as well. So it's always just a great time to give you an opportunity to have some face time to chat with your colleagues that might be trying to tackle the same challenges as you, or may have come up with a creative solution to a problem that you're experiencing. So Alicia is poised and ready to make some breakout rooms for us. So the first question is, what is on your plate right now that you would really love to kind of just brainstorm with another colleague in another district on? Services, we might be working with some private schools. We should be just in the thick of it with SIPSAs right now and comprehensive needs assessments, reclassification of English learners. Right now. If not, then we'll just put everybody in random breakout rooms, and you could talk about your spring break plans if you want. But it's, you know, we have these Zoom environments aren't quite the same for building relationships with each other. And we really want you guys to have the phone number of some people that are in this room so that you can phone a friend whenever you're in the middle of a project that you really need some support on. So I'll just ask Alicia to put us in maybe rooms of 4, Alicia, if that works. And let's do 10 minutes. And is back in 10 minutes. I'm going to interpret that as productive conversation. Was there anything talked about that is good for the greater order here? Anybody
I actually want to ask Crystal, my coworker, a question, because I had a question that I wasn't able to answer.
Okay, go for it.
We use our district assessment for our RFEP thing now. Do you want to talk about, Crystal?
There's only specific ones. So we did have some teachers that got together at grade levels and did calibrated normed grading. So like with a rubric, blind grading, calibrating, all that. So I did run those by our FPM reviewer, and he said that that would meet the criteria, but we also have some like padded criteria to that. So they have to have above a certain percentage in the class, a certain percentage on that one norms test. And it's more of kind of like an exemption than a standard procedure. So personally, I had the teachers that were turning those in submit a copy of their actual test and work, and I keep those as well.
Did that answer your question, Angela?
I think so. I'll follow up if not. Thank you.
Follow up with Crystal, not me, because I don't know.
Anything else? All right. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and Alicia.
Thanks, Lisa. We have a very brief accountability and assessment update. Some of this may look familiar for those of you who attend the Riverside County Assessment Network, the RCAN meeting. Brian Wood shared some of this information at that time, and he's actually not here today. So Alicia and I are going to pinch hit for him. So just a few updates about the California School Dashboard. So in our most recent legislation, our trailer bill, there was a requirement that our dashboard be accelerated. There was comments from the public that our dashboard comes out too late in the year to be actionable. And so, as you know, each year since this most recent year, the dashboard will accelerate, meaning that it'll come out earlier each year from now until 2026. And as a result of that, the next iteration of the dashboard in December of 2024 is supposed to be published on December 1st. However, that's a Sunday, and it's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And so for those of you who know the school calendar, recognize that most people will not be working the Sunday after Thanksgiving, which also includes the folks at CDE. So because of that, they're hoping to publish the required dashboard to meet the required deadline. They're hoping to publish the dashboard on the Friday before Thanksgiving. So we should see a dashboard in November this year. And that will be representative of all of the data from the 23-24 school year. In addition, this is additional details about what that looks like. So we will have those proposed changes going to the board in July. Then our CalPADS deadline will be on August 18th. And then we have the proposed release of the dashboard on November 22nd. And what that condenses is the private preview. Typically, we have our dashboard indicators come out 1 week for a 1 week preview, and they do them based on state priority. So we'll have our LP and academic indicator come out for 1 week for private preview. Then we'll have our priority 5 indicators, which is our chronic absenteeism and our grad rate. But again, instead of having 1 week per priority, it's now going to be condensed to 1 week for all of the indicators at once. So again, just something to think about for next year in terms of communication and rollout. We want to plan for that to happen in November instead of December. So when you're setting up your principals meetings or setting up your district calendar, just anticipate that that data will be published earlier. And so we'll have to think about communication earlier as well. Also, there's been discussion about the transitional kindergarten as a separate grade level on the dashboard, or as a separate, including them as a student group in our indicators. So as of the 2024 dashboard, we're not going to see any changes. Again, CD is going to be analyzing that data. And as Leticia already shared, if the AB 2266 bill is passed and our TK students are not going to participate in the LPAC, then of course that means that that would impact the LP. So that would be part of the conversation as well. So we have kind of multiple things happening, discussion about TK on the dashboard, as well as discussion about the exclusion of TK from the LPAC and what impact that would have for our LP. The other thing that was recently defined, which I know we've had conversations about with this group, is the definition of LTEL and the fact that this will be a student group on the upcoming dashboard. So in 2024, we will see LTEL data as a separate student group on the dashboard. The SB 141 defined LTELs as not attaining language proficiency within 7 years of classification, which we know differs slightly than our state definition that had previously been published. However, this is in recognition of the fact that research shows that language proficiency takes 5 to 7 years. So this gives that full 7 years for the definition of LTEL to be in place. So that being said, LTELs will be on the dashboard in 2024 and will follow the same end size as foster and homeless youth, which is 15 students instead of 30 students. So again, we would see an LTEL student group for each of the indicators where we have at least 15 LTELs that are in any particular indicator. So the LTEL student group would be applied to all of the indicators listed on the screen. And there are current discussions about what would happen for the impact on the variety of indicators. So as you know, our academic indicator for our English learner student group currently includes RFEPs. So the conversation is, well, where does that go? Does that go with the ELs, and then ELs are separate from the LTELs, and LTELs are their own group that does not include the RFEPs? And so we're going to have this conversation about what that means when it comes to publishing our indicators. And then also for the English Learner Progress Indicator, we would have 2 student groups. We would have the English learners and we would have LTELs in the LP, whereas currently the LP is just 1 student group as English learners. So again, lots to continue to discuss. There's going to be the technical design group that's going to be talking about all the different ways that this could be operationalized. They're also going to talk about what do we do? Do we keep LTELs in the EL group? Do the LTELs stand alone and they're removed from the EL group? How does this get represented in each of the indicators? And then of course they'll seek educational partner input. So we have a lot of conversations to happen between now and the November publication of the dashboard. But we will keep this group up to date and seek your input as appropriate and when we can, as it relates to publishing LTELs on the dashboard. Connected to that is LTELs in the LCAP. So I'm going to turn it over to Alicia.
Good morning, everybody. So if you were at our workshop on Friday, we already had this discussion to some degree, but if you have the 15, so the requirement is 30 or more ELs and now 15 or more LTELs that you must have a action in there specific to the language acquisition program and the professional development. So the conversation we've been having as a county office is, do these have to be separate actions? And we're gonna say probably not, right? Like it depends on the needs of the LTELs. So we're still flushing that out with the other county offices and with CDE. So we'll make sure to communicate with our LCAP writers what that's supposed to look like. But you can see the other bullet there, or the bottom one, is that LEAs that have both the 30 plus and the 15 plus LTELs need to have actions for both ELs and LTELs, right? So, and remember, these actions need to be based on their specific needs of those 2 student groups. So just a reminder about the LCAP requirement. Melissa, you're muted.
To support you with that, we did provide some, we're going to provide a few resources for you. So we developed using some of the data definitions that we are aware of, that we wanted to provide you some data related to the LTELs in each of the different indicators that are on the dashboard. So we prepared district level reports to give a rough estimate of what LTEL performance would be. But since business rules have not yet been released and the technical design group at CDE is still working on what that looks like, we aren't really sure who is going to be included. So Matt had a question in the chat about, does this start the 8th year of instruction? They're still discussing at the state where is the snapshot of students that fits into this definition? Because we know with our other student groups, students may exit a program at some point during the year. And so because of that, does that mean that they're excluded from that indicator that year, or are they still included in that indicator that year? And then the following year, they're then excluded. So we don't know yet which actual students will be captured. So again, in full transparency, these are our best estimate or best guess based on what we know using student enrollment data and I'll show you a screenshot of it. What we've done is we've done for each district, each of the indicators on the dashboard, the all student group, the EL student group, then LTEL at 6 years and LTEL at 7 years. So again, and this is followed by a data table that has more specificity on how many students this represents per bar, and then what the actual distance from standard would be for each of these different ways that the data is sliced and diced. And the reason for this is because we don't know what ultimate decision the state will make in terms of which students are included or excluded in each of these. But we did want to give you the overall, which is what is consistent with what's on your dashboard, the EL, which is what's consistent on your dashboard now, and then this LTEL 6 and LTEL 7 based on the state definition of LTEL and the federal definition of LTEL, which is now going to be our dashboard definition of LTEL. So that's what we have provided or prepared. Here's an example of suspension rate comparison for those different LTEL definitions. And we can send those to you. Again, we didn't publish them because it's not published that way currently on the dashboard. So they're kind of it's public data in that they're dashboard indicators, but it's not published on the dashboard, so they're technically private. So as a result, we will email those to you if you're interested, as well as some data related to avid participation or students with disabilities. If you're interested in that, please feel free to email Nick, and he can send your district-specific report for students with disabilities and LTEL. Carrie, did I miss anything on any of that related to the LTEL data?
Nope, it all sounded great.
All right, thank you. All right, last but any other questions about LTEL?
I'll just make a quick comment, just because I was sitting with somebody working on their LCAP data a couple days ago and really kind of processing, well, what should be in our LCAP? Where do we get this baseline data from? So this really is an opportunity to jump on. I mean, I know we're all, absorbing so much information today, but the fact that our team can support you with this and that you don't have to go in and figure out the years and do all that is, it's a pretty big lift because these groups don't exist within your student information system right now. But I would also say that when you do add this information to your LCAP, it would be easy enough. And I don't know, Melissa, would this be a good suggestion that when they're listing the metric, you could put in parentheses like LTEL 7 years, so that next year when you go to write it again, you're like, which data did we base that off of? Because by then it will be official. Of course, we'll have the official numbers. So I would say, just be clear in your LCAP which of those definitions you're using, LTEL, and then just put that number in parentheses so that you can reference it in the future. Does that sound like good advice, Melissa?
Yes, and to your point, Lisa, we always encourage districts within their LCAP to define their data source. And so they could even put RCOE LTEL report, blame it on us, right? We're preparing this for the county. So just say RCOE LTEL report. And then next year, when you actually get data from the dashboard, you can then in your goal analysis, say we are now going to be using, instead of the RCOE LTEL report, we're going to be using our dashboard data, since the LTELs will be published at that time. So again, we certainly can support you in including metrics for your LTELs within your LCAP. And, you can reference it within the metric section as well.
And one more just little nuance, Melissa, is that we're used to, like, when a new metric is coming on board, that it's reported out in purple, right? Because we don't have 2 years of data. But my understanding with this LTEL data is that they're going to go back to the 23 dashboard to calculate it. They'll calculate it again on the 24 dashboard, and you actually will get a color for your LTELs. So that, I think, is great that they're backtracking this, and that we're not going to see it in purple first and then see it, in a color another year down the road. They're going to apply it to that data that was already released in 2023.
Correct, because these the students that are going to be included already exist, and they already, the indicators already have the 5x5s. It's not like we're creating a new indicator. And so they're going to apply this definition to the existing 5x5s that exist. And so they can do the status and change using prior year data and current year data in order to establish the performance level colors. All right, then with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia for our last few slides, and then we'll give you some time to discuss in breakouts.
Yeah, just a few more. So this one was shared at our RCAN meeting as well. And this is the statewide who's taken the test so far, right? Who's completed. And you can see it's looking good, right? And we always want to make sure that we're monitoring and making sure that it's 100% of our students for LPAC, right? If you can't meet that requirement, let us know if you need help or whatever, but as close to that 100% as you possibly can. So you can see, it looks like there's only about 60 students left for the initial alt. So making sure that you're getting all of those kids tested and where they need to be soon, right? The year is coming to a close quickly. Another thing we wanted to point out is some like data issues that might be happening. So one of them is when students are exiting or not showing up for school, right? They enroll and they don't show up. People, LEAs are just removing the record instead of doing an actual exit. And that remains in TOMS. And that becomes an issue because there's these students who are on your books essentially that are not being accounted for. So that, and then also a similar issue, you can see that second little bullet there, is the TK students who are going to be given a gift of time and move back down to preschool. They also need to be exited correctly. So just making sure that your exit codes and CalPads are correct so that you're not having students that are floating around, essentially orphaned is the phrase. Next slide. And then we talked about expected score releases earlier for the dashboard, and the actual expected score releases for LPAC are early May for grades 3 through 12 and late May for K through 2. They do need to wait for those test booklets to come in. So as soon as you have a PAC done, as soon as you can, make sure you're sending those test booklets in. And then the CAS, the ELA, math and science will be, the student reports and information will be out mid to late May. So just kind of information for you to keep a heads up.
Mhm.
And I think that's it. Any questions on those few slides? All right. Do we have time for a breakout room, Lisa? Or
Sure, 5 minutes.
Okay.
Do you want me to do it or you got it?
I'm in there already. All right.
All right. Everybody looks like ready and raring to, add data to their LCAP. I know it's such exciting work, right? See, Matt's got 2 thumbs up. We see smiles. It's good, but definitely lean on our team if you need any support in that. We're ready and willing to help. All right, I am going to turn it over to who's sharing their screen. Stephanie, Crystal, Lisa, Stephanie.
It's me.
Great. Take it away.
Good morning.
And I know we're behind, so you still take your 20 minutes. Don't feel
Okay,
rushed.
we will. We'll be good. Alrighty. Can you guys see?
Mhm.
See.
We can.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, I'm Stephanie Medina. I work in assessment and accountability in the Temecula Valley Unified School District. Lisa Brown and Crystal Fielstra are also here with us. Crystal's going to speak at the end about our EL pieces. We did just finish an FPM, an in-person FPM. It was all of our first FPM who were in this room. I won't say it was fun, but we did make it through and we learned a lot. So we're going to share some of that with you guys today. What we're hoping to hit on today, we'll talk about kind of what was reviewed, what our FPM went over, talk about some general advice we learned through experience. I'm going to show you our Google Sheet that we use to organize all of the evidence collection and how that worked for our district. Go over our findings. We did have a small handful of findings. We were hoping for 0. And then we're actually going to do a deeper dive into the education equity instrument because it's relatively new, I think, for the current iteration. And it's a little bit more challenging to pass that instrument. So we want to talk a little bit more about that and what we learned. And then Crystal, as I said, will look at the English learners because we know a lot of those administrators are in this room. So our overview, we haven't had an FPM since 2017, 2018, so 8 years ago, which is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it's less stress, and a curse because there's a lot of catch up to do. A lot of things have changed in 8 years. In education law. So a lot of things we had to kind of learn. These are the 9 programs on which we were reviewed. There were quite a few. I'll let you guys read through those quickly. I will say about the last one on there, school support and improvement, that covers both ATSI and CSI. We do not currently have any CSI schools in our district, so that instrument was pretty minimal for us. It was just the inclusion of the ATSI elements on our existing SIPSAs, and we passed that instrument before they even came in person, so that was a little bit lower stress for us. Okay, our overall tips. We were lucky that we had a spring review, so we had some more time to prepare. So we recommend organizing early and meeting with all of the departments that this hits because our review was so large with 9 instruments, it hit a bunch of different departments. So meeting with those people and letting them know what's coming and what you need worked out really well for us. So I'm going to actually show you our Google Sheet now. So when you have FPM training in August, the CDE will share a spreadsheet with you of all of the evidence requests for every instrument. So we use that and pared down to the instruments on which we were being reviewed. And then we added a column for department. So this is the fiscal sheet. We had a big spreadsheet first and added like, this is fiscal, this is HR, this is our department, this is English learners, whatever, and put all those in there. And then from that, we created a separate tab for each department to be kind of organizing their materials. So we made the decision that only our department would be in the actual CMT to upload evidence because ours was just so large, and we have had so many new programs in the last couple of years that we didn't want to overwhelm our staff with another one. So we organized with Google Sheets, and then when we met with each department, which we'll talk about, we put people on each evidence request that we needed. We found it was most successful to put one person on each item instead of like, it's one of these 3 people, because if that happens, everyone kind of thinks everyone else will do it and it might not get done. But you can see on this fiscal sheet here, like everyone knows their exact list. Everyone knows exactly what they're doing. We have some conditional formatting. So when they check something off, it turns green. Very exciting, very motivating to get through that FPM. And then the tabs also helped because leadership, like directors and assistant soups, could kind of keep a monitor on how their staff were doing with organizing their evidence requests. So that was how we organized. We uploaded into Google Drive. If you're a Google district, I recommend trying to get the desktop version of Google Drive installed, where you have the files like actually saved on your computer. So that way you don't have to download, upload. You can just upload straight from the Google Drive. So that's our sheet. Let me present again. So like I said, assign each evidence request to one person. Schedule check-in meetings with departments. So we kind of explained to, we call it big cabinet. It's all of our directors and above. So we explained to them pretty early in the year, here's the programs being reviewed. Here's what they're looking for. We're going to meet with your department. So we met with each department at the beginning to assign all those evidence requests, like I said. And then each department we kind of met again with around January. And the meetings were not actually the most important part. It was the 24 hours before the meeting when everything would start getting uploaded because they knew they were getting checked on. But that helped to kind of clarify what was needed and all of that. We also scheduled meetings at the reviewed sites. So we had at the sites that had Title I and Title III being reviewed, we met with the entire staff in like a staff meeting to say, here's what people are looking for. They're going to be here. We wanted them to not be overwhelmed. We also met at PLCs for things like our career technical review, our PE review. We met with all the categorically funded staff at the district and the sites to say, like, this is a reminder of what your job description is. We want to make sure that you know what your Title I duties are and your non-Title I duties and whatever else so they could answer those questions. We found it communicated to be transparent. So we had the most success with being really honest with our reviewers, even about the things that were not quite compliant. We found that trying to hide things was less productive than just telling them like, here's where we're at, can you help us? For the vast majority of them, the impression was very much that they were working with us to get to compliance, not that they were out to get us. So we found that to be the most successful. And then, as you know, once you upload all the documents to the CMT, you get a bunch of feedback. So because we didn't have everyone for all the programs in the CMT, we also used our spreadsheet. I'll flip back to that in a minute to show like, here's the questions we've gotten. Here's the comments we need to respond to, and then went from there. So that looked like, I want to flip over here. So here was our CDE comments page. Again, it's formatted, so everything's grayed out. I think we had like 150 comments total that we had to respond to. So this was our running to-do list. And I would tag people like for, what is this? Like for PE, I would tag the director over PE and say like, hey, this is you. We need a comment back, or we need this document. And then we would kind of hide the columns that were done. And this became our running to-do list, especially the couple weeks before and during the review. Lisa and me and Crystal, like we would all be in here like refreshing, like what's our to-do list? What am I working on? What is so-and-so working on to get those all resolved? I can't find my Canva here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, these are the findings we ended up with. The people in this room oversee, like me and Crystal and Lisa oversee Title I and Title III. No findings in those, so we're very excited about that. The ones we did have, we had 2 in equity. Our Title IX job description, we have one of our directors in HRD as our Title IX coordinator, but there was more pieces that they wanted covered in job descriptions than he had in his job description. So we're working on that. Equity, we also had our suicide board prevention policy was a finding. We do have the CSBA exemplar. So be aware of that if you have the CSBA exemplar, the reviewers do believe there's some pieces missing from that, from their legal interpretation of the ed code. So we're going to use their exemplar, which is about 16 pages. The CSBA one is about 2. So there's a lot more. So we're putting that to board this next month, and hopefully that will be resolved. PE.
Stephanie, can I
yeah.
pause you just really, really fast?
Uh-huh.
Only because Lisa Palmer is coming up and she just emailed me about this topic right here. And I sent her, I was only aware of the CDE model policy. Is the CDE model policy good?
Is that the 16-page one?
Oh, Lisa, the CDE policy comes up as a 15.7 readability. So
you have to modify it. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And so I have City of Bakersfield City School Districts. They have an exhibit that's based on, or it's geared towards elementary students. So we're looking at that. We're going to have a finding. We're not going to get it to the board in time. So.
There was some of these that we probably could have scrambled on, and we were like, let's just do it right and take some time. And yeah, that one's really tricky because there's the K6 piece also. Then for PE, instructional minutes in band and ROTC, we give PE credit for those classes, but the reviewer wanted a accounting minute by minute of what those classes do. And it has to be 400 minutes every 2 weeks, which is 50 minutes a day, which ours is not because of course they have their content to cover as well. So we're looking at some solutions for that. And then for Title II, the decision was made in like 2022 that our HR department stopped testing instructional assistants and educational assistants for competency, which we didn't know about. So that was a finding as well, because we have to do that. So we're fixing that now and we'll go from there. Okay, so equity, I want to zoom in on this one because it was pretty difficult. So I looked at the data from last year of how many districts were reviewed and how many findings were issued. And the average is 7.2 findings a district in equity out of 9 or 10 instrument items. I think it was 10 last year. We had 2, so we were very excited to be kind of better than the curve in that. And we worked real hard to get down to those 2. It was a little bit questionable if we were going to get there or not. Our recommendation is to start really early for equity. Most of the instruments have 1 or 2 board policies attached to them. Equity has about 10. So depending on your process for getting new policies board approved, that just takes some time. So we did that really early. We kind of tried to space them out throughout the year so it wouldn't be a bunch of things at once, but that was time consuming. You also have to do a lot of signed affirmations from your superintendent. That wasn't a huge deal for us. Just know what the process is. We had to get some signed the week of FPM. So just make sure that you're in communication and have a process to get those signed quickly. The athletic documents are very time consuming. So the Title IX piece for athletics, you have to turn in things like the square footage of all of your locker rooms. You have to turn in your athletic expenditures separated out by gender and sport and category. So things like girls soccer spent this much on uniforms and boys soccer spent this much on uniforms. And if those are different, you have to have a narrative for every single category, every single sport. Again, very time consuming. It's doable. Our athletic directors were super helpful and super collaborative with us, and we were very grateful for that, but just start early on that. Revise the website. We had to fix a lot of things on our website, even the week of FPM. Our webmaster was an absolute rock star and buckled down and got it done, but just be aware that's a thing. Make sure you use the resources in the FPM box. So the instrument will say one thing, but there's some more specifics of how they want the evidence that are going to be in the FPM box that you might not necessarily see on the instrument. And then you will likely need to send what's called an addendum to all parents, students, and staff with updated information. So I'll show you ours. And this is why we got a lot of our items cleared with sending this that last week. So when you update things like your sexual harassment policy, non-discrimination statement, all of that, it has to go in certain publicized materials. But if those have already gone out for the year, like handbooks and annual notifications and all of that, you have to send this out as like this is fixing those things that already went out. So this was ours. We had to update all of these things for non-discrimination. We had 504. We had to create a welcome packet for parenting, lactating, and pregnant students. And so this is kind of the cover sheet of these are all the things we're updating. And then down below, it has all the things that we're updating with. So all the actual policies, our lactation packet is in here, all of those things. So we sent this out the Wednesday of our review week to every student, every parent, every staff member, and turned this in with the documentation of sending. And that's what cleared like those other 7 items for us, was sending this out. So I know our reviewers, some districts are a little bit more hesitant to send this out, and that's why they end up with so many findings, but we were able to get this pushed through and got that resolved here.
Did you send that out electronically, Stephanie?
Yep. We sent it through email for staff and through, we have Infinite Campus. I know no one does, but we have Infinite Campus. So we send it through our IC Messenger for students and parents. And then we didn't know this. You need to put your non-discrimination statement literally everywhere. Every newsletter you send out, every social media account you have, every flyer, every job posting has to have your non-discrimination statement. I'll answer questions in a minute too after Crystal's done. Here's some links to resources. So these are also in Canva, which we use for presentations. So this is the presentation we gave to our district leaders and departments about our FPM. This is a presentation we did at a school site for the whole staff to say, like, this is what they're looking for in your classroom. This is what we're being reviewed on. And then you're supposed to do a welcome presentation when all the reviewers get there about your district, and that's a little bit vague. So Lisa Brown made this presentation about some statistics about our district and all of that. And with that, I'll keep presenting, but Crystal can share about EL. I know she's going to talk pretty quick.
Yeah, hi everyone. We didn't have any findings, and I'm sharing a bunch of resources with you. Stephanie, if you want to go to the next page. This is kind of an overview of what we did, and we just mirrored with Stephanie, but because ours includes so much PD around the designated and integrated ELD and different pieces, we kind of took it to the next step, creating common PDs that we trained all of our assistant principals to deliver at their sites. And if any were uncomfortable, we went to the sites and spoke. I think we did 5 or 6 different school sites so that all of our teachers had the same trainings. I think that ensuring that designated ELD across the district in every classroom, elementary, middle, and high, is taking place at the right time with the right materials, that took a lot of effort. But if you go to the next one, Stephanie, I shared, there's a resource folder, if you can pull that up. And we want to share this with everyone. I don't know if it's not linked for some reason. If you could pull up my notes from the visit, we'll make sure the resource folder is linked for everyone. And this has kind of my notes in talking to our reviewer. A lot of the questions I asked him, I would write down his answers here. And I think the big focus of CDE right now is getting LTELs reclassified. And I mean, it's coming out on the dashboard. But they said essentially if a student scores a 4 on the LPAC, they really want districts to move heaven and earth to find other means of reclassifying that student and finding them eligible to reclassify, including working with your special ed department and creating an alternate reclassification process, which I want to say thank you to Lisa, because I went to a training last year that she recommended and I used some of their forms. And so we do have an alternate process through IEPs. If a student does not score a 4 on the LPAC, but they are an LTEL and they believe it's due to disability, they can still get reclassified. The other little observations are kind of fun things. Like they mentioned, it's so cool that your superintendent was at the welcome meeting, and it's so cool that Lisa Brown gave up her office for one of our reviewers. Like they really notice those things. So these are just kind of like hot tips on how to do well and impress them. That's really it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email in the chat, and if anyone wants to like,
I added it today.
Oh, okay, thank you. I put some other information, all that, but if you want to Zoom and meet and talk through any specific areas, the other big piece that we were really excited about is that we did get the official seal of approval, if you will, for our model where our LPAC 3s at the middle and high school levels are pushed into classes where they receive designated ELD in clusters in that general English class setting. And so that was something that the reviewers were looking at, were taking notes on, and did give us approval for, and we had presented on that last year at NISO. So I'm proud to say that it's working and the state approves. So let me know if you have any other questions or you want to meet and talk about EL things.
Yeah, I'm looking at the chat now. So there was a question about Title IX training. So our Title IX coordinator in HR did a training through a law firm. I'm not sure of the name of it, but that's, I think, pretty standard for Title IX coordinators to do it through legal. But then our reviewer also said that if anyone's participating in the Title IX process, including like any investigations or anything, they also need some form of training. So we had put that principals help with investigations sometimes or referring. So that's part of our finding, is that we have to train those principals in Title IX. our reviewer shared with us like a slideshow and a video from a third party thing that we're going to try to use. We're requesting an extension on that finding to do that training, right? But they were pretty clear that anyone who's involved in Title IX needs to be trained somehow, but only the official like Title IX, you know, decision makers and all of that need the formal law firm training. Are there any other questions?
I'm just really proud of you guys. You guys did amazing. I know this was a huge lift, and you put an incredible amount of time into all components of this review. So I was just so excited, especially, you know, I care about all the programs, but I especially care about Title I and Title III. So that was really exciting. And, you know, we've had a lot of requests for districts that are implementing an embedded designated ELD program at the secondary level. And you guys are really the only district that I know of that's done it with a really high level of intentionality. We have some districts who I won't name any names, but they just kind of schedule kids into an English class and call it their designated ELD, but the teacher doesn't know it's their designated ELD. They haven't received any type of training. Nobody's really following up on the students, etc. And you guys have a very, very high level of intentionality around that model. And so I did hear back from Ben in particular, just to say like, hey, are you okay with us recommending, you know, this model to others? And I appreciated his response. He said, did Temecula's program meet the letter of the law? Yes, it did. So because that you guys had intentional grouping, it was during a designated time during the period, it was, he could see it when he walked into classrooms, it did. And then he said, is this the best program? And it was like, that's kind of yet to be determined. That was his response. So I just really look forward to just kind of seeing, I don't know if you guys are now going to be collecting data on that model to see if it is the best program for students or not, or if that's in your plan. But I was just excited that it passed, because we were worried about that. You know, that they would look at that and say, no, they need to be in a period on their schedule that says designated ELD. But we were really excited about the possibility of that model, just because so many folks are struggling with giving high school students access to A through G, to CTE, to electives, you know, to the things that really engage kids. And so you guys have found a way to do that. So, anyway, more information to be discussed. Any
So
questions for them? Oh,
I was just gonna say, our emails are here. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We don't have any
Yeah.
secrets or, and I know that especially with equity, there was so many things we were like, we just want to see like how another district did this. Like, we're super happy to share what we came up with. And we'll tell you if it passed or not.
yeah.
We're happy to collaborate because it was a lot.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. And we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So let's come back at 10:36. And Colleen and I will then take us to the finish line. See you guys back in 10 minutes. I am going to turn the mic over to Colleen.
Thanks, Lisa. Sorry about that. I'm reacquainting myself with Zoom, which is a good thing, but a cumbersome thing. Let me get my screen sharing. So just a few reminders related to CSI and ATSI, as we've been out and about quite a bit supporting schools and districts and developing their CSI plans or their ATSI plans through the SIPSA process. Just a reminder that it is critical that schools that are eligible for CSI and ATSI identify resource inequities. And the general definition we use to describe resource inequities is that disparity between how schools are using their resources, inclusive of time, people, money, actions, practices, programs, and how they are allocating those resources aligned to the actual student need. For those of you who have been to some of our workshops or throughout the NISO sessions, we shared the resource equity diagnostic that's really focused on the 5 dimensions of resource equities at the school level. We've linked that in there for you if you would like to use it with the schools that you're supporting, or take a look at it yourself and maybe modify it to use as a priority inequity that the school is really looking into addressing in their plan. And a reminder that the actions and services and strategies in the SIPSA for schools that are eligible for ATSI and CSI should be from those top 3 tiers of evidence, using the cut points defined here in this graphic. We want to make sure that our actions and services have strong evidence, moderate evidence, or promising evidence, knowing that with our schools that are not eligible, that are just receiving Title I funds, we can use tiers 1 through 4. And many of our schools have been identifying that first best instruction as a root cause for low performance across indicator areas. And these resources have really been helpful in helping school teams select the just right treatment or the just right action to address their root causes for low performance. I especially want to point out, we have a couple of districts that have really been looking at those 14 strategies from McGrell, which that first article is unleashing the power of first best instruction with those clear effect sizes of how when implemented as intended, the outcomes will move as a result of using those strategies. The Visible Learning Meta X comes from the work of John Hattie and all of his friends in studying the impacts of those evidence-based interventions or evidence-based teaching practices in the context of different school settings. The Connecticut State Department of Education, this resource has come from a study that was done in the state of Connecticut, in which they had revealed that first best instruction was a challenge across their state, and they've done a great job at researching the different high quality practices and bundling them up together and giving them those ESSA ratings. So nice clarity on using some of those interventions to improve student outcomes. That data-based intervention tool is really designed for a small group of students who are having difficulty in tier 2 interventions, or students with disabilities who are not making progress on their IEP goals, and to address some of the behaviors that schools and districts have been reporting post-COVID as students are showing increased attendance across the nation and in the state of California, as well as in our own county. The What Works Clearinghouse formerly was kind of a challenge to use. However, it is really the gold standard used in the state of California as well as across the nation in identifying high quality evidence-based interventions. And it was predominantly program heavy, but really has transitioned to a set of intervention guides that are focused on ensuring that quality tier 1 and quality tier 2 instruction. And lastly, the link Evidence for ESSA is highly program heavy. So for example, perhaps you are using Read 180, but you're not achieving the desired results in using that Read 180. Evidence for ESSA shows you, oh my goodness, Read 180 is really a high quality, strong intervention for students. So, excuse me, then the teams can take a look. Are we implementing Read 180 as it's intended? Did I catch us up, Lisa?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
You're fine.
Needless to say, we'd like to give you an opportunity to chat in a breakout room and discuss how you've been supporting schools and identifying their inequities and selecting the just right evidence-based interventions in their upcoming plans, and sharing any challenges or barriers that you've experienced, and offering each other solutions to overcome some of these challenges, and helping schools identify their inequities as well as select the just right interventions to treat their inequities. So I will, how much time is okay, Lisa? I know we're supposed to be done
Let's do 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Okay, so I will go ahead. Oops, I'm not a host. Maybe
I
somebody
can do it.
Thanks, Lisa. Give you an opportunity to have this discussion in a breakout room. And
Second.
I'll go ahead and just put those discussion.
Welcome back. Is there anybody that would like to share who's doing some great work in this area, who has supported principals in identification of resource inequities or in really supporting the implementation of evidence-based actions in their school plans?
I don't want to put Jill on the spot, but she really had a great example of how she is supporting a current evidence-based intervention and what they're going to do to amplify its impact. If you don't mind, Jill, it was great.
No, I was just complimenting Colleen for bringing up Read 180 because it's been a big conversation in our district, and Read 180 going forward is going to be it's going to be new components going forward. So I feel much more positive. But what has happened is we have a lot of veteran teachers that are using Read 180. Everybody believes wholeheartedly in it. And they all kind of have a different definition for what fidelity to the program was, because they ended up picking the things that they loved and they saw were effective, and then did other things. And so I'm looking forward to the new things, looking forward to MAP, that is going to be the new assessment instead of the RI, so we can have more actionable data and be able to really see that growth that is intended for our students spending their time in Read 180. So thank you again.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to share anything, or shall we wrap up this section? Wrap it. I saw the cue, Lisa.
Matt did it first.
Oh, Matt did it first. Well, thanks, Matt. So just as a reminder, we do have some support opportunities here available if you and or your school team would still like to join our workshop series. We have 2 days left, April 25th and May 16th. Feel free to register. We've left that registration open because people have registered after we begun, but which is fine. We'd love to have you there. If you have a new member coming on to either leading the school or at your district office who needs a little refresher on what CSI and ATSI are and all of the planning requirements and implementation requirements associated with those eligibilities, there's a slide deck and a recorded webinar linked in here. Or if you're just looking for some individualized or customized support, my contact information, my email is linked in the slide deck. Please don't hesitate to reach out to myself and or actually any of the awesome people on my team. We are happy to help in any way, shape, or form that we can. And I'll turn it back over to Lisa. And have a great week, everybody. I hope everybody just has some enjoyable plans coming ahead.
All right. Thank you, Colleen. All right, so let's talk about Title I funding. So I have had a couple of meetings lately. I found that this was occurring in 3 different districts. And being that I don't regularly talk with all 23 districts in Riverside, the fact that I heard this was happening in 3 districts made 3 I just felt like I wanted to bring this to the attention of everybody. So you might hear what I'm about to say and say like, Lisa, what are you talking about? We have never done that. But in case you are doing this, I wanted to bring it to your attention that it might not be a best practice. So I've worked with a few school sites lately that are, the way their structure works in their district is that they, at the district office, are conducting a comprehensive needs assessment. and a district office team, and I assume along with some educational partners, make decisions for some evidence-based practices that they would like to implement in their schools. And these include things like instructional coaches, maybe an intervention program, maybe like the Read 180 program that Jill was just talking about, maybe bilingual aides, parent liaisons, or fill in the blank right here, right? So these actions are then placed onto principals' SIPSAs. The principals are required by the district office to put these actions into the goals and actions section of their SIPSA. The district office says, all right, you're getting an instructional coach. You now need to have an instructional coach listed as action 1 under your first goal. So there are these mandatory actions by the district office that are being placed into the principal's plans. What's considered centralized services. So these should not be put onto the principal to put as an action within a goal. These should be categorized as centralized services, and they actually should be deducted from the total Title I allocation prior to calculating school site allocations. So what does the Ed Code tell us? Ed Code says that LEAs must, so this is a requirement, utilize no less than 85% of their Title I allocation at school sites for direct services to students, regardless of whether the services are centralized at the LEA level, managed by the school, or funded through LEA reservation. So we know that 85% or more of our Title I allocation has to be used to fund direct services to students, right? But what Ed Code doesn't care about is whether or not these are centralized direct services to students, or they are managed by the school, where the school has the autonomy to determine what these services are. So I'm going to give you an example of how this can impact the SIPSA when these services are not considered as centralized services and they are put on the principal to put in their plan as a mandatory action. So I want to show you 2 different scenarios and how this can greatly impact the funding at the school. So here's the example that I made up. So District A has $750,000 in Title I to be used for direct services for their 2,000 students. All schools are a school-wide program. The district tells principals that they must add a mandatory action to their SIPSA to pay for an instructional coach, okay? So they're not considering these coaches as centralized services. They're telling the principals, you're getting instructional coaches, you need to put this as an action in your SIPSA. So I'm going to walk you through this little breakdown here. So if we have $750,000, we have 2,000 eligible students, that's going to break down to $375 per student. School A has 300 students, so 375 times their 300 students would give them $112,500. But the district is saying you must have an action for an instructional coach, and the coach that School A is given has been in the district for many years, and their salary is $130,000. So when they put this action in their SIPSA, their Title I money that's remaining is negative $16,500. Basically, their entire school site allocation is going to be used up by this coach's salary. Really, they're only going to be able to cover $112,500 of that coach's salary, and the district is going to have to figure out how to fund the remaining salary of this coach. School B has 550 students, so they would get $206,000. They have a coach who's newer in the system. They only make $85,000. So when they put that coach into their SIPSA, they have a remaining balance of $121,250 that their school site council gets to allocate. Now remember, School A has no money left. There's no money left for the school site council to conduct a needs assessment and determine what actions they'd like to implement. School B has $121,000 for that purpose. School C also has 550 students, but they get a coach whose salary is $100,000. Their remaining is $106,250. And then school D, the largest school, 600 students, they have the largest allocation, and they end up getting the cheapest coach. The coach that they're assigned costs $70,000. They therefore have a very large allocation left of $155,000. Now, this is actually happening in a district that I'm working with, where we have the school with the lowest allocation receiving the most expensive coach, and therefore really giving them no money for their school site council to plan from. Let's see how this changes when we turn those coaching salaries into centralized services, okay? So how would the school site allocations change if the coaches were deducted as centralized services before calculating the school site allocations? So remember, the total allocation is $750,000. All of those 4 coaching salaries that I just laid out for you total up to $385,000. So if we deduct that $385,000 off the top as centralized services, the remaining bucket of money for school site allocations is $365,000. We divide that by our 2,000 eligible students, and we now have a lower per student allocation of $182.50 per student. But what happens to school A? They are the most impacted because now they actually have a school site allocation to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment around and to determine some evidence-based actions to implement as a result of those needs. The allocations at the other schools do go down a little bit, but you can see overall this creates a lot more equity around those school site allocations versus the model where we are asking principals to put these actions into their plans. So where do we document this in the Khan app? So down here, gotta move my little Zoom toolbar. Down here in the consolidated application, there is a section called procedures, required and authorized reservations. So what do we see in this section? We see money for school and parent family engagement, LEA parent and family engagement. We see money for our neglected youth. We also see our reservation for homeless students. If we still are reserving any money for public school choice for transportation, all of those reservations go on this page. And there's one more bucket down here at the bottom, and it's called enter the amount reserved for other authorized activities. This is an optional field. The CDE recommends that LEAs consider the general criteria when approving activities or expenditures supported with Title I Part A funds based on the criteria listed on CDE's Title I Part A page. So this would be the row where that reservation for instructional coaches goes within the Khan app. Once we put that in as a reservation, it's now going to take that money off of the top. And instead of asking those principals to put those actions in as a mandatory action in their SIPSA, which then has the potential to wipe out their entire allocation, they now, all of those dollars would be distributed in a more equitable way. So I want you to just think for a minute, and I'm just curious if there's anybody here in this room who might have questions about this. Is this new to you? Is this a new learning? We have a room full of experts. I love it. Because I'm telling you, 3 districts that I have talked with this week are using the model that I described, and not necessarily this week, but this school year. And it just concerned me that it might be a point of learning or point of clarification for everybody. So does anybody have any questions about that? Does this jive with what you're doing already? I see heads nodding. Okay, good. Okay, good. All right, that is great. Right, so we're at that time of year. It's March, nearly April, and we know our calendars are already getting filling up for support for next year, and we know that you guys have the same thing going on for you. We have months already, if you can believe it, at our office that we can't even get a room because we're doing so many amazing things. So we wanted to just kind of preview some of the support that we can provide next school year in the 24-25 school year. And we want to know if you're interested in any of this support. Getting in touch with us sooner rather than later is definitely advised. So this support can look like really anything you would like it to. So I have a few examples of work we're doing this year. We're in Lake Elsinore. We have been providing strategic planning with all principals. What they decided to do was divide their cohorts by high school theater pattern. So I believe they have 4 cohorts that are running simultaneously. Is that right, Colleen? Or 3, actually. Now that I say it, I feel like it might be 3. They're meeting with their cohort 5 days throughout the year. We have been digging deeply into monitoring and evaluation. At the last meeting, I thought it was really great. Everybody opened their SIPSA. It's like, okay, starting on box 1 of your SIPSA, what goes there? Let's discuss. Let's talk with a partner. Okay, pause. Everybody complete the first box in the plan. I mean, we just really walked everybody through in a very systematic way in how to write that SIPSA. What does a high quality SIPSA look like? In Menifee, it's looked a little bit different. We've done strategic planning with all principals for 3 days. These were actually broken up into half days. We started off by training all principals in the Title I program. What does it mean if you are part of a Title I program? What are the must-dos? What are the activities that must occur on your campus every year? What is a school site council? Really walking them through those topics. We also took them through all principals through the Title III instrument and walked them through every item in that instrument to define what does it mean to have an ELAC? What does an election look like? From there, we focused on monitoring and evaluation and their comprehensive needs assessment. So that's been really fun work out in Menifee. And then we've done an additional 2 days. We're kind of calling them SIPSA office hours, where I've been present and the principals can it's an optional day, but it's been exciting because several of the principals have taken advantage of this, where they just come in, they have time to be off their campus to write their SIPSA, and where one-on-one support can be provided. And Menifee, I'm sure just like many of you, have the whole gamut of brand new principals to experienced principals. And so it's been really nice to provide that kind of one-on-one support depending on where they're at in their principalship. Desert Sands has looked even also different from the other 2 models. So what we've been doing in Desert Sands is strategic planning with all principals, but they also brought a leadership team from their site, separate from that strategic planning workshop, which was pretty similar to what we're doing in Lake Elsinore and Menifee, with the difference being that they had those leaders from their school. We engaged in a SIPSA template revision, and I'm going to walk you through what that has looked like out in Desert Sands this year. We also included capacity building for their Ed Services team to support principals with monitoring and evaluating their SIPSA. I don't know why, but I feel like we need a new term. We're calling this team, they're all called SIPSA buddies. It feels, I don't know, a little juvenile. I think of that, the My Buddy commercial for any of you 80s babies out there. But that's what I think of. But anyways, they are SIPSA buddies. So they have created a really awesome support structure in Desert Sands, where there's an Ed Services team member that's assigned 2 to 4 principals in the district. And they are there to be a sounding board, to be a thought partner, to kind of help send those nudging emails when needed if, things don't appear to be getting done. But what Desert Sands found is that all Ed Services team members take a different pathway to that position. And some of their Ed Services folks have never written a SIPSA before. So to ask them to support principals with writing a SIPSA, conducting a comprehensive needs assessment, having high quality evaluation and monitoring, they said, hey, whoa, we've never done this before. Could we get some support through this process? So that's been really fun also. So we've had I think 3 or 4 meetings. They're just kind of half-day meetings with the Ed Services team to build their capacity in supporting those principals so that it's not all falling on the shoulders of the state and federal program director, because that's just a really big task. So I love that the entire Ed Services team has really been involved this year to support them. So what has that SIPSA revision process looked like? So they had a couple of goals in Desert Sands. They said goal 1, we really want to increase engagement and intentionality with the SIPSA so that it is regarded as a true strategic plan, not just this thing I need to do by myself in my office over spring break. Not that any of us would ever do that, wink, wink, but that it really was regarded as a strategic plan. And there was a second goal of ensuring that the comprehensive needs assessment that's embedded in the SIPSA actually assesses needs in all goal areas. So for anybody who's using DTS, I'm sure you're very familiar with the fact that DTS helps us out by pulling in all of this data into the template. But if you really reflect on the data that DTS is bringing in and what we're regarding as the comprehensive quote unquote needs assessment is not in fact very comprehensive. It's very academic focused, number 1. But it's academic focused on testing grade. So if you are an elementary school, the data that's being pulled in for CASP testing has no, there's nothing for your kindergarten or TK through 2nd grade students reflected. Of course, we know the education they're getting in those grade levels is of course impacting those CASP scores, but many districts have universal screeners or other types of formative assessments that they're using in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, that we want that to be analyzed during that comprehensive needs assessment process also. In addition, in Desert Sands in particular, they have a college and career readiness goal. There was no data for anybody in that goal unless you were a high school. So high schools were getting their CCI. So they were, getting a percentage rate on percentage of students that were prepared on the CCI, and they were getting a graduation rate. But in that section for middle schools and elementary schools, the data was blank. So there really was no data being brought in for that goal in particular. Some of you have goals around parent involvement. DTS definitely isn't bringing any data for that because that's so localized. And so there really was this goal in Desert Sands to ensure that that comprehensive needs assessment truly was comprehensive. So what this process looked like is they started and we worked on this with them, and Angie is here. So Angie, unmute, and if you want to interrupt me at any time if I'm missing anything. But first they surveyed principals to gather input on what they wanted to see changed in the SIPSA and with the SIPSA support structure. They convened a small SIPSA think tank to review the survey results and to begin making edits to the template. So that think tank was comprised of, I'm kind of thinking my way through who's at the table. We have a high school principal, 2 middle school principals, and I believe 1 or 2 elementary principals. And so that's who our think tank is, along with, they have a project facilitator, the state and federal program director, and then myself. And so we, at that think tank, we looked over the survey results from all the principals. We prioritized what it was that was really important to principals and where we needed to focus our attention. So then we began to literally, we got scissors, we got tape, and we began to cut and paste the old template, taking out sections that were irrelevant, moving sections to make them more relevant. We brought that version back to the think tank. We got more revisions from them. We implemented those revisions, and that steps 4 and 5, I think we cycled through these about 6 times. I don't know, Angie can attest to that at least 6 times of, okay, look at this new version. And then we'd say, oh, DTS didn't do this, or they forgot to do this, or they didn't understand what we were asking for. So we implemented those revisions. Think tank principals were then given priority access to, this was a critical step that I didn't even realize how important this was going to be when we started this process. But the think tank principals were given priority access to start their 24-25 SIPSA. Oh, there's an incomplete sentence right there, but so that they could check that all was right. And they found lots of inconsistencies, like hey, this is blanked out or whatever. So those think tank principals got in there, started writing their SIPSA a couple months ago. Once we got all those kinks worked out, we presented the new template to all principals a few weeks ago. It was during this month in a workshop format, and we took them through box by box. We gave them time to, you know, take a look at it, to ask questions, to write some data statements. And the feedback that I heard from principals, and I don't know, Angie, if you can confirm this, was they were so thankful. They were excited about the new template. They were excited. They felt heard. I don't know, Angie, if you want to chime in on anything there.
Yeah, I think, you know, there was such serious buy-in by the principals, especially originally with that think tank. They were calling me even the morning of the meeting that we were going to roll it out to say, oh, by the way, just heads up, this is, you know, how you might want to present this, or this is how this is looking. So that think tank, back to what Lisa said, was so essential. And then also, I've not heard one complaint. Matter of fact, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're already looking at minor changes for next year's SIPSA, which aren't bad. It's not, it's just, they see it as so streamlined and good, but they're thinking about, well, what about this other additional data, perhaps?
Yeah.
We can bring in those kind of things. So it's been very, very good.
I wanted to, I skipped a slide, sorry about that. This is their new template. It's linked right here. And thank you, Angie, for letting me share this with everybody today. I'm just going to zip down really quick. I want to show you some really big changes. Greatest progress, as an example, is now by goal area. Makes it really clear what we're asking for in that area. Greatest needs by goal area. Resource inequities by goal area. And then I just want to get down to, while there's lots of changes to get excited about, something that we noticed in DTS is they do English language arts, then they do math, then they do some English learners, then they do English language arts again, then they do some math, then they do some English learners. Everything is just kind of thrown in there. And so we streamline the data so that all the English language arts data is together. English language arts, then it's broken down by grade level. And then what's really exciting, and I know some of you guys are already doing this, but now they're bringing in their local assessment. So iReady is all their iReady data is now pre-populated in their template. And then you see the same for math. And then you'll see the same for English learners. And then at the end, something that's missing that I don't know if anybody has picked up on this. In most of your templates, you see these three little boxes that say conclusions based on this data. 1, 2, 3. Then in the next table, conclusions based on this data, 1, 2, 3. We got rid of all of those, which did result in a few cheers in the room. We've done the same in some other districts. And instead, what they have to do is at the end, right here, they have to summarize strengths and needs from all the ELA data, from all the math data, from all the English learner data. So it really becomes, those conclusions based on this data just sometimes felt like a regurgitation of the data that they saw above, where now we're really asking them to look at that data and be very clear. What strengths did you notice? What needs did you notice in ELA? What strengths did you notice in math? What needs did you notice? And so you'll see that replicated through the other goals here. The college and career goal, I would say I'm super excited about this one just because of the fact that I mentioned already, elementary and middle schools, this part of their SIPSA is blank. And so now with the think tank, we said, what would we be looking at if we were assessing college and career readiness in elementary or assessing college and career readiness in middle school? And so they said, well, we're all AVID schools. How's AVID program implementation going? Do we have some strengths in that area? Do we have some needs? Some other college career readiness programs, we said, do you have STEM on your campus? Art, music, coding? Are we preparing kids to enter and get excited about some of those CTE pathways that are going to lead to them being prepared on the college career indicator? So this is really open, and you can see it's tagged with who responds to each one of these prompts. This one is exciting. AVID student performance on CASP or iReady compared to non-AVID students. This one is the number one indicator of high school success, is the percentage of 8th graders receiving a C or better in core ELA, math, science, and social studies. So we really bolstered the amount of data that that principals are looking at to really see what strengths and needs do they have in goal 2. Goal 3 is their I always call it culture, climate, and then I get corrected. What is it, Angie? Or
That's
is
what
it
I wanna
culture
say.
climate? Maybe it
Yeah,
is. Okay. It might be a different district where I
Yeah.
call it that, and that's maybe it's Elsinore. Anyway, absenteeism suspension. It was really important to the think tank that we explicitly give space to analyze panorama results, and then some other things like ATS recidivism. This is from their referral system. So lots of great things, great revisions have happened within this template to really make it more meaningful. So I hope that's helpful to you, but we just wanted to give you some ideas of the work that we've been doing throughout the county that we would love to come and get started on with you. Of course, some of this work does require a contract. Some of it, you know, if you just need a thought partner on some things, we can help with that. Here's a SIPSA template for you. I did include this in a recent NISO newsletter, but wanted to bring it to your attention because I've heard from several directors that it's been helpful for them to use this and to adapt it to their own schedules. So if you click on this image, it will take you to my editable version. You can just make a copy of that and adapt that to your context. There, it opened for me, which I didn't want it to do. There we go. All right, a quick English learner update here. So if you recall, we shared some data with you back in January, and what we found was that what the state had sent messaging out on was that the percentage of students who attained a level 4 or a level 3 on the alt LPAC on the 2023 LPAC, so a year ago, the percent remaining English learners as of January was pretty high statewide. We still had 81% of our students with disabilities and 33% of our students taking the summative LPAC that were still an English learner that had not reclassified as of January 19th. Those numbers looked even more dire, especially for our students with disabilities here in our county. So we sent out an SOS to RCAM, to you guys, to everybody. And on February 23rd, they gave us an update. So the state had been reduced down to 68%. And look at the huge impact just from January to February, a month later. You guys really rose to the occasion and responded to the call. We were able to reduce our number here in Riverside County from 87% to 67%. So we reduced that number by 20%, which is amazing. And we were able to get 9% more of those students reclassified that had taken the summative LPAC. Well, we have some updated data. So now as of March 14th, at the state level, those numbers are down 11% from that initial number. So they're sitting at 22%. Those taking the alt LPAC is now down to 62%. And we now oddly exactly match the state average at 62%, where at the beginning of this, we were significantly above, but we've reduced that percentage by 25%. So that's exciting for us because that means conversations have been happening. You guys have been really tapping on your teams to make this happen. Ultimately, we're opening up more opportunities for students by getting these students reclassified. So in January, we had asked you, hey, what's happening? What are the barriers to this? Is it the assessment? Maybe you don't have an assessment for criterion 4 for your students that take the alternate summative LPAC. So we're excited to report we've gone from 87% now down to 62%, but we still see that number as pretty significant. So even though we've been able to reduce it by 25%, we just want you continuing these conversations back with your teams. Why is it that 62% of the students that are taking the alternate LPAC that the state is considering proficient still have not reclassified? So we want you working with your teams to really think about what those barriers might be. And I just have a feeling it's this criterion 4, but we know the conversations have been working, so just keep having them and ensure that all of our students, all of them, have access to reclassify. In our latest NISO newsletter, I put an opportunity for an Optel community of practice. We're going to be holding this next year. If this is something that excites you to be a part of, this is really just going to be about coming together and talking about implementation considerations, what professional development might we need to provide in our districts, and then hopefully we'll get to the level of exemplar practices. Please respond to this survey if that's something that you would like to be included in. The model that Melissa had suggested this, and it's turning out from the 4 responses I have already, they're excited about it, is holding these meetings after NISO next year. So if we're in person, we would hold the meeting just an additional hour after NISO since we're already together. But if you do have other folks from your district that are participating that don't participate in NISO, we would zoom them into that opportunity. So let us know if you're interested and if that model would work for you. There's another possible opportunity that I'm excited about. So we've already launched this for this school year. It's the CSI ATSI English Learner Community of Practice. We have 5 districts that are participating this year. I'm looking at my list and I'm not sure if any of the districts that are participating are present. So we've had Valverde, Hemet, Moreno Valley, Banning, and I can't remember who I'm missing, but we have 5 districts. It has been very, very well received through feedback from the participants. They have really benefited from this opportunity. They have really enjoyed the time together, and they feel that their capacity is being built to go lead some change back at their district. So we want to put out our feelers to see who might be interested in participating in this opportunity next year. So target audience would be district leaders that support CSI, ATSI eligibility, multilingual or English learner directors, school teams from schools that are eligible. And so this gets pretty specific, from schools that are eligible for CSI or ATSI, but that also have at least 3 very low status dashboard indicators for English learners. So who is that, you ask? I have a list for you. So on this list right here, I believe I counted 13 of our districts that have schools on this list. If the school is marked in yellow, it means they met the criteria last year and meet it again for this year. And you can see how many indicators on the right are at the lowest level for English learners. So the threshold was 3, but some of the schools have 4 red indicators for ELs and some have 5. So if you're interested to see if you have any schools that meet the criteria for this COP, you can click on that link there. You would be coming together to collaborate with other school teams that are experiencing similar English learner challenges. Topics include root cause analysis, defining high quality designated and integrated ELD, EL shadowing, conducting an EL program audit, EL program evaluation, and then how do we support our dually identified students. So this year we have had 6 days. It was 4 full day in-person sessions of learning with 2 full day site visits, and then an optional opportunity to meet with facilitators for one-on-one coaching. This is an opportunity that is free of charge. So please, 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 if you have a school on this list, as soon as you can, if you could respond to this survey. After we get through all the spring breaks, I'll send out another email to everybody just to give a little nudge, but I'd love for you to reply even if you're not interested. So there is if you have a school on the list and you're not interested, please also respond to the survey to just say, you know, we're not interested, we're maybe supporting the schools in a different way. That being said, we are still looking for that COP. We are still looking for a site to bring a group of educators to observe designated and integrated ELD. The date of this walkthrough is set for May 8th. Our first walkthrough was in at Hemet Dual Language Academy. It was amazing. It does not have to be, you know, perfect instruction. In fact, we prefer that it's not, you know, where everything is, you know, scripted and structured. If you just think that there are some good things going on in some of your schools, we would love for you to invite us in to come and observe. So please contact me if you'd be willing to open up 1 to 2 of your schools for a day of walkthroughs on May 8th for us to come observe integrated and designated ELD. Some quick announcements. We got this notification through our legislative or our government relations office. So there's an organization called Teach Plus. They have a 4th cohort coming out. They're calling it the California Emergent Bilingual Change Agent Network. And so what is happening through this program, applications are due April 8th. We know that's a really tight timeline, but this is for a cohort beginning in May through the 24-25 school year. Teachers will receive monthly coaching, a $1,000 implementation grant, and a $2,000 stipend in recognition of their time and effort if they participate. So the call to action says, do you know of a teacher leader who would be a great candidate to lead their peered teachers to solve a problem in their school or district in supporting English learners or dual language learners? If so, please nominate them or share the opportunity to apply today. There is a recorded webinar here that they are going to be holding on April 4th from 5 to 6 if you'd like to get more information, or you could register for that opportunity here. You can email Lindsay here if you have any additional questions. Through the EPIC grant, we've told you about this before. Please be sure you're getting onto that EPIC hub every couple of weeks because they're constantly adding more workshops. So hopefully you set up that notification. So for the 24-25 DLI consortium, we already have some dates, so save the dates for that. The Best Awards recognition and celebration is going to be held on April 12th from 6 to 8:30. Please register if you plan on attending. There are the Dual Language Teacher Network is being held April 18th and May 15th. So please register if you haven't already for that. And Victor is also leading a paraeducator network collaborative, and they are meeting on April 18th at 1 o'clock. So if you have some paraeducators that would like to participate, forward that to them. There are still some opportunities for integrated and designated ELD for teachers on the left and for administrators on the right. So please register for those if that is of interest. And then we have a training on the California English Learner Roadmap being held on May 14th with a registration link there. For the State Seal of Biliteracy, we keep this in as a regular slide, just knowing we're kind of coming to the finish line of getting these ordered. If you have any questions or if you have any new folks that are supporting this process in your district, please have them reach out to Victor and he can support you with any questions that you might have, like how do we know the kids that qualify or how do we order seals? We're ready to help you with that. There are lots of resources here if you want to look here first before reaching out to him. These may answer most of your questions ahead of time. These are all hot off the press from this school year, so they're updated and ready for you to share. One more focus group that I want to tell you about is for P3 learning progressions in any of the learning domains. If this is of interest to you or anybody in your district, they are gauging interest out there in the field. So please forward that along to anybody in your district that would like to be part of the P3 learning progressions. This webinar, I think several of you are participating already on the, it's just a recentering of the ELA ELD framework. They have 2 more sessions this year, April 9th and the 14th. I'm really interested in this next one that's coming up, assessing student progress and providing needed interventions. I'm excited to participate in that one. And with that, that brings us to the end of our meeting. You have all of our contact information here for our team. And we are just really happy you hung out. We have 16 left. So thank you to all of you guys for hanging in there for those 4 extra minutes today. Please reach out if you guys need anything or have any questions on the topic shared